The transport ship broke through the atmosphere of Terrace Prime's largest moon, and Jake Morrison pressed his face against the viewing port to get his first look at the Galactic Military Academy. The complex spread across the gray landscape like a metal city, with towers reaching toward the purple sky and training fields that seemed to go on forever. He had seen pictures before, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. Jake was 22 years old and had never been this far from Earth. In fact, most humans had never left their home planet. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 40 years ago, and they were still the new species that everyone else watched with careful eyes. Some aliens thought humans were interesting, others thought they were weak. The ship landed on a platform where dozens of other cadets were already gathering. Jake grabbed his bag and walked down the ramp. The gravity here was lighter than Earth's, and each step felt strange, like he might float away if he moved too fast. Around him, alien cadets talked in languages he couldn't understand. The translation device in his ear would help with that soon, but for now, everything was just noise. He saw tall creatures with silver scales and sharp teeth. He saw beings that looked like they were made of blue crystal. He saw things he had no names for. A Kralix cadet walked past him, and Jake had to stop himself from staring. The Kralix were known across the galaxy as the fiercest warriors. They stood over 7 feet tall with bodies covered in thick scales that could stop most weapons. Their eyes were yellow with black slits, and their hands ended in claws that could tear through metal. This one looked at Jake as it passed, and Jake saw something in its eyes that might have been curiosity or might have been contempt. He couldn't tell. "First time off Earth?" a voice asked behind him. Jake turned and saw a female cadet with pale blue skin and large black eyes. She was Velaran, he realized. The Velarans were known for their logic and intelligence. They didn't feel emotions the way humans did, or at least they didn't show them. "Yes," Jake said. "Is it that obvious?" "You're staring at everything," she said. "And you're human. There are only 3 humans at the academy this year. The other 2 arrived last week. I'm Jake. Kira." She picked up her own bag. "We should go to the registration hall. Being late on the first day is not logical." Jake followed her across the landing platform. Other cadets moved around them, some in groups, others alone like him. He noticed that most species stuck together. The Kralix cadets walked in packs. The Valorans moved in organized lines. A group of small furry creatures chattered to each other in high-pitched voices. The registration hall was enormous, with ceilings so high that Jake couldn't see the top. Instructors stood at desks, checking names and assigning room numbers. Jake got in line behind a cadet who had 6 arms and skin that changed colors every few seconds. When it was his turn, the instructor looked up at him. This one was Kralix, older than the cadets outside, with scars across its scales and one eye that was milky white. "Name," the instructor said. "Jake Morrison." The instructor looked at a screen, then back at Jake. "Human." "Yes, sir. You're in Barracks 7, room 42. Your roommate is also human. Training starts tomorrow at dawn. Don't be late." The instructor paused, studying Jake with that one good eye. "Humans haven't done well here in the past." "I'll do my best, sir." "Your best might not be enough." The instructor handed him a data pad with his schedule. "But we'll see." Jake took the pad and walked away, feeling the instructor's eye on his back. Kira was waiting for him by the door. "What did he mean about humans not doing well?" Jake asked. "The last human class was 12 years ago," Kira said as they walked outside. 3 humans enrolled. 2 quit in the first month. The third made it 6 months before failing the physical requirements. Humans are not built for this kind of training. Thanks for the encouragement. I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm stating facts. Your species has weaker bones, less muscle density, and slower reaction times than most species here. But you also have advantages. Like what? I don't know yet. That's why it will be interesting to observe you. They reached the barracks, which were long buildings made of some kind of gray metal. Jake found room 42 on the 2nd floor. Inside, he met his roommate, another human named Chris. Chris was shorter than Jake, with dark hair and a nervous smile. "Thank God," Chris said when Jake walked in. "I thought they might stick me with a Kralix. I've been here a week and I'm already terrified of those things." Jake dropped his bag on the empty bed. "They're just another species. Just another species that could rip us in half without trying," Chris said. "Did you see the size of them? And those claws? We're here to train with them, not fight them." I know. It's just different seeing them in person." Chris sat on his bed. Where are you from? Colorado. You? Nevada. Small town, nothing special. Chris leaned forward. Did you hear about the trial of worth? No, what's that? Some kind of test they do at the end of first semester. Every cadet has to face this creature called a razor wing. It's from the Kralix homeworld. Apparently it's huge and terrifying, and if you show fear, you fail. Jake unpacked his clothes, putting them in the storage unit built into the wall. How do you know about this? The other cadets talk about it. I heard some Kralix cadets discussing it in the meal hall. They seemed excited. We seemed like we might die. Did they say what happens during the test? You go into an arena alone and the razor wing comes out. It tests you somehow. If you're brave enough, you pass. If you're not, you're sent home. Chris shook his head. I've got 4 months to figure out how not to wet myself in front of a death monster. Jake looked out the window at the training fields below. He could see cadets running obstacle courses, practicing combat moves, working with equipment he didn't recognize. Somewhere out there, a creature called a razor wing was waiting, a test that every cadet had to face. We should get some sleep, Jake said. Training starts early. That night, Jake lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The room was dark except for the glow of the moon's surface outside the window. He thought about what the instructor had said. Humans haven't done well here. He thought about Chris's fear, about the razor wing, about being surrounded by species that were stronger and faster and had been warriors for thousands of years. Earth was 40 light-years away. His family was there, his friends, everything he knew. He had volunteered for this, had competed against thousands of other humans for one of 3 spots at the academy. He had trained for 2 years to get here, and now he was here, in a room on an alien moon about to begin training that might break him. But Jake didn't feel afraid. He felt something else. Determination, maybe. Or curiosity. He wanted to know what he was capable of. He wanted to see if a human could succeed where others had failed. He closed his eyes and drifted toward sleep, not knowing that in 4 months, he would stand in an arena facing a creature that would change everything he thought he knew about strength and courage. The alarm went off while it was still dark outside. Jake rolled out of bed and nearly fell as his body adjusted to the lighter gravity. Across the room, Chris was already awake, pulling on his training uniform. First day, Chris said. I barely slept. Jake got dressed quickly. The uniform was made of some material that adjusted to his body temperature and seemed to weigh almost nothing. Outside their window, he could see lights coming on across the academy as hundreds of cadets prepared for the day. The training field was a massive open space with equipment that looked both familiar and completely alien. There were weights for strength training, but they floated in the air. There were running tracks, but they curved up walls and across ceilings. Instructors stood at various stations waiting. Commander Zekthar stood at the front of the assembled cadets. He was older than the other Kralix Jake had seen, with silver scales that looked like armor and scars that told stories of old battles. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire field without any need for amplification. You are here because your worlds believe you have potential, Zekthar said. But potential means nothing without discipline, strength, and courage. Most of you will fail, some of you will quit, a few will succeed. We will discover which you are. The commander's eyes swept across the crowd and stopped on Jake for a moment. Jake met his gaze and didn't look away. Training begins now, Zekthar said. The first exercise was a run, 5 miles across terrain that changed from flat ground to steep hills, to areas where the gravity suddenly increased or decreased. Jake started strong, but within the first mile he realized how outmatched he was. The Kralix cadets ran ahead of everyone else, their powerful legs eating up distance. The Valorans moved with efficient precision. Even the small furry creatures were faster than him. By mile 3, Jake's lungs were burning. By mile 4, his legs felt like they might give out. He saw Chris ahead of him, struggling just as much. But Jake kept moving. He thought about the instructor's words. Humans haven't done well here. He thought about proving that wrong. He finished the run in the bottom quarter of all cadets, but he finished. Chris came in a few places behind him, gasping for air. I think I'm dying, Chris wheezed. You're not dying, Kira said, appearing next to them without even breathing hard. Your cardiovascular system is simply not accustomed to this level of exertion. That's a fancy way of saying I'm dying, Chris muttered. The next exercise was strength training. Jake watched a Kralix cadet lift weights that must have weighed 300 pounds. The cadet made it look easy. When it was Jake's turn, he could barely manage a third of that weight. The day continued like this. Combat training where Jake was too slow. Strategy simulations where he did better but still struggled. Technical courses about alien technology that made his head spin. By the time evening came, Jake was exhausted in ways he had never been before. In the meal hall, Jake sat with Chris and tried to eat food that looked like nothing he had ever seen. Some of it tasted good, some of it didn't. "I don't know if I can do this," Chris said quietly. "Did you see how far behind we were today?" "First day," Jake said. "We'll get better, will we? Or will we just keep failing until they send us home?" Before Jake could answer, someone sat down across from them. It was a young Kralix, smaller than the others, with bright green scales instead of silver. "You're the humans," the Kralix said. "Yes," Jake said carefully. "I'm Dex. I saw you in the strategy simulation today. You found a solution that none of the other cadets thought of. I still lost. But you thought differently. That's interesting." Dex looked around, then leaned closer. "Most Kralix don't talk to other species much. We're taught that we're the strongest, the best warriors. But I think that's stupid. If we were so perfect, why would we need an academy?" Kira sat down next to Dex. "That's logical thinking. Your species values strength, but strength alone doesn't win wars." "Exactly," Dex said. He looked at Jake. "Don't let the other cadets make you feel weak. Different doesn't mean worse." Over the next weeks, Jake fell into a rhythm. Wake up before dawn, train until his body couldn't take anymore, study until his brain felt full, sleep, repeat. He got better at some things. The running became easier as his body adapted. The combat training started to make sense as he learned to use speed instead of strength. But there were still moments when he felt completely outmatched. Like the day they did zero-gravity combat training, and Jake spent half the time spinning out of control while Kralix cadets moved like they were born in space. Or the day they practiced with energy weapons and Jake's human reflexes were just too slow to hit the moving targets. Chris quit after 6 weeks. He came back to their room one evening, packed his bag, and said he was done. "I can't do this, Jake," Chris said. "I'm not built for this. None of us are. You should quit too before you get hurt." "I'm not quitting." "Why not? What are you trying to prove?" Jake thought about that. "I guess I want to see what happens if I don't give up." Chris left that night. Jake got a new roommate 2 days later. One of the furry creatures whose name Jake could never quite pronounce. The new roommate was friendly but didn't speak much human language. 3 months into training, Commander Zekthar announced the trial of worth. Jake was in the combat training hall when the commander gathered all the cadets. "In 1 month, you will face the Razorwing," Zekthar said. "This is a tradition that has existed for thousands of years. The Razorwing will test your courage, your warrior spirit, your worthiness to continue training." A hologram appeared above the commander, showing a creature that made Jake's breath catch. The Razorwing stood on 4 powerful legs with a body covered in armored plates that looked like they could stop bullets. Its head was massive with jaws that could easily crush a human. It had intelligent eyes that seemed to look right through the hologram at the watching cadets. "The trial is simple," Zekthar continued. "You will enter the arena alone and unarmed. The Razorwing will approach you. It will test you. If you show courage, you pass. If you show fear, you fail and will be sent home." "What does the Razorwing do?" someone asked. "It will know if you are a warrior. That is all you need to know. Prepare yourselves." That night, Jake researched everything he could find about Razorwings. They were native to the Kralix homeworld, apex predators that had been bred and trained for warfare. They were intelligent, possibly more intelligent than many species gave them credit for. They could sense fear through changes in body chemistry and electromagnetic fields that living beings produced. The trial footage showed cadet after cadet facing the Razorwing the same way. Stand tall. Show aggression. Project strength. Meet the beast's challenge with a warrior's defiance. The Razorwing would snarl, charge, test the cadet's resolve. Those who stood firm passed. Those who flinched or ran failed. Jake watched the footage late into the night. He saw Kralix cadets roaring back at the Razorwing. He saw Velaran cadets standing with calculated calm. He saw dozens of species all approaching the trial the same way. He thought about his conversation with Dex weeks ago. Different doesn't mean worse. Kira found him in the library the next day. "You're worried about the trial. Everyone is. Not the same way you are. I can see it in how you move. Other cadets are worried about fear. You're worried about something else." Jake looked at her. What if the warrior way isn't the only way? Explain. Every cadet faces the razor wing with aggression, with challenge. That's what warriors do. But what if that's not what the razor wing actually wants? What if everyone is so focused on showing they're not afraid that they're missing something? Kira was quiet for a moment. That's an interesting hypothesis. Do you have evidence? No, just a feeling. Humans trust feelings more than most species. That's considered a weakness, or maybe. Or maybe it's something else. The month passed quickly. Jake trained harder than ever, but his mind kept returning to the razor wing. He watched more footage, studied the creature's movements, read everything he could find about its species and behavior. The night before the trial, Dex found Jake on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Nervous? Dex asked. Yes, me too. My father faced this trial 20 years ago. He said it was the most terrifying moment of his life, even though he passed. Dex, what do you know about how razor wings were used in ancient times? Not much. They've always been war beasts. Why? I'm just curious. Jake watched a transport ship pass overhead. Do you think we're doing this trial the right way? What do you mean? Nothing. Just thinking out loud. Dex left and Jake stayed on the observation deck until the facility lights dimmed for night cycle. Tomorrow he would face the razor wing. Tomorrow he would either prove he belonged here or be sent home like Chris and so many others. But something in Jake's mind had shifted. He wasn't thinking about the trial the way the other cadets were. He was thinking about an intelligent creature that had performed this same ritual thousands of times. He was thinking about what it might mean to face such a creature not as an enemy, but as something else entirely. The morning of the trial arrived cold and clear. Jake woke before dawn and found that he couldn't eat breakfast. His stomach was tight with nerves. Around him, other cadets moved with the same tension, all of them preparing for the day that would decide their futures. The arena was located on the far side of the academy complex. It was a circular space carved into the ground, with walls that rose 30 feet high. Above the walls, observation decks curved around the entire circle, already filling with cadets, instructors, and visitors from various worlds who had come to watch. Jake stood in the preparation area with the other cadets who would face the trial today. There were 20 of them, representing 12 different species. He saw Kira checking her equipment even though they wouldn't be taking anything into the arena. He saw Dex pacing back and forth, his green scales darker than usual. Commander Zekthar entered the preparation area, and all the cadets immediately stood at attention. Today you face the Razor Wing, the commander said. Some of you will pass. Some will fail. The Razor Wing has never been wrong in its judgment. Trust the trial. Trust your training. Show the courage that brought you here. The commander looked at each cadet individually. When his eyes reached Jake, they stayed there for a long moment. The trial will proceed in the order you were called, Zekthar said. First cadet, prepare yourself. A massive Kralix cadet named Vorn stepped forward. Jake had seen Vorn in training before. He was one of the strongest cadets in their class, aggressive and confident. Vorn walked toward the entrance to the arena with his head high. The cadets moved to viewing screens that showed what was happening in the arena. Jake watched as Vorn entered the circular space. The arena floor was bare dirt, with markings that formed some kind of pattern Jake didn't understand. The sky above was purple and the morning sun cast long shadows. A gate on the opposite side of the arena began to open. The viewing screens went quiet as every cadet watched. The Razor Wing emerged from the darkness beyond the gate. Even through the screen, Jake felt his heart skip. The creature was bigger than the holograms had shown. It moved with power and grace, every step deliberate. Its armored plates caught the light, and its eyes scanned the arena before locking onto Vorn. The Razor Wing opened its jaws and released a sound that Jake felt in his chest even through the screen. It was part roar, part snarl, a noise that evolution had designed to trigger fear in anything that heard it. Vorn didn't move. He planted his feet, spread his arms wide, and roared back at the Razor Wing. His whole body radiated aggression and challenge. The Razor Wing charged forward, closing the distance in seconds. It stopped inches from Vorn, so close that its breath must have washed over the cadet's face. For a long moment they stared at each other, predator to predator. Then the Razor Wing stepped back. It circled Vorn once, gave a short rumble, and returned to its gate. Vorn had passed. The cadets around Jake began breathing again. Vorn walked out of the arena looking tired but triumphant. Next cadet, Commander Zekthar called. One by one, cadets entered the arena. Jake watched each trial carefully. A Velaran cadet stood with mathematical precision, showing no fear through pure logic and control. The Razorwing circled her twice before accepting her. A small furry cadet from a species Jake didn't know tried to show aggression, but couldn't hide his trembling. The Razorwing approached, sensed the fear, and refused to back down. The cadet ran. He had failed. Kira went next. Jake watched his friend enter the arena with her usual calm. The Razorwing emerged and did its testing snarl. Kira stood perfectly still, her body language showing readiness without aggression. She had calculated the exact posture needed to show courage without triggering additional challenge from the creature. After a longer assessment than most cadets received, the Razorwing accepted her. Dex's turn came. Jake could see his friend's hands shaking even on the screen. The Razorwing sensed it immediately and pressed closer, more aggressive than it had been with the others. But Dex held his ground, forcing himself to meet the creature's eyes. The Razorwing tested him for what felt like forever before finally backing away. Dex had passed, but barely. More cadets went. Some passed, some failed. Jake noticed that everyone approached the trial the same way. Aggression met with controlled aggression. Challenge met with willingness to fight. The Razorwing understood this language. It was testing for warrior spirit, for the quality that made someone dangerous. But Jake kept thinking about something he had read in his research. Razorwings in ancient times hadn't just been weapons. They had been partners. The oldest Kralix texts mentioned bonds between warrior and beast, relationships built on something more than dominance. Jake Morrison, Commander Zekthar called. Jake's heart hammered against his ribs. Around him, the other cadets watched. He heard someone whisper that this was the human, the species that wasn't built for combat, the weak ones who got emotional. He walked to the arena entrance. The passage was dark and his footsteps echoed off the walls. Then he emerged into the sunlight and the arena spread out before him. The observation decks above were packed with beings from across the galaxy. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes on him. He heard whispers, some curious, others dismissive. The human. What warrior spirit could he possibly have? Commander Zekthar's voice came through speakers built into the arena walls. Cadet Morrison, prepare yourself. The gate across from Jake began to open. Jake took a slow breath. His hands were sweating. His heart was racing. Every instinct in his human brain was screaming that he was about to face a predator that could kill him without effort. The Razorwing stepped into the sunlight. Up close, it was even more impressive. Its scales weren't just armor, they were beautiful, each one catching the light differently. Its muscles moved under its skin like cables of steel, and its eyes, those amber eyes, held an intelligence that the trial footage hadn't captured. The Razorwing looked at Jake. It tilted its head slightly, as if it were curious about this small creature standing in its arena. Then it charged. The creature moved fast, faster than Jake expected. It closed the distance between them in 3 powerful strides. It opened its jaws and released that sound, that primal roar that was designed to make prey run. Jake felt his body tense. Every fiber of his being wanted to back away, to flee, to escape from this thing that his instincts recognized as a threat. But Jake didn't run. He also didn't puff up his chest or roar back or take an aggressive stance like every other cadet had done. Instead, Jake did something that surprised everyone watching. He took a slow breath and let his shoulders relax. He looked at the Razorwing with clear, steady eyes. Not challenging, not afraid, just present. The Razorwing stopped a few feet away, confused. This wasn't the response it was trained to expect. Every cadet for thousands of years had met its challenge with aggression. This one was doing something different. The creature circled Jake, snarling again. The sound echoed off the arena walls. Jake turned to keep the Razorwing in view, but his movements were calm. He wasn't preparing to fight. He wasn't showing submission. He was simply acknowledging the creature's presence. In the observation decks, Jake could hear the confused murmurs. What was the human doing? Why wasn't he showing warrior spirit? The Razorwing moved closer, so close that Jake could smell its breath, could see the old scars on its armored plates. This close, he could see that the creature's eyes weren't just intelligent, they were tired. How many times had this magnificent being been forced to perform this ritual? How many cadets had it tested, all of them seeing it as nothing more than an obstacle, a challenge to overcome? When was the last time someone had looked at it and seen a living creature instead of a test? Jake thought about Earth, about the dogs that humans had lived with for thousands of years, about horses and cats and dolphins, about how his species had learned that true connection came not from domination, but from respect, from recognizing that other creatures had their own intelligence, their own dignity. He thought about what he had read in those ancient Kralix texts. Partners, not weapons. Bonds, not ownership. The razor wing was inches away now, its massive head level with Jake's. It could bite him in half if it wanted to. It could end this trial in his life in a single motion. Jake did something that made the entire arena gasp. He lowered his gaze. Not in fear, not in submission, but in respect. The way someone might bow slightly to acknowledge another person's presence. Then he looked back up at the razor wing, meeting those amber eyes with his own. In that moment, something passed between them. The razor wing's eyes widened slightly. It made a sound Jake had never heard before, something low and almost questioning. For thousands of years, this creature had tested warriors. It had seen aggression, challenge, controlled fear masked as courage. It had evaluated cadets based on their willingness to fight, their warrior spirit, their readiness for battle. But it had never seen this. It had never had someone look at it with respect instead of challenge. Never had someone acknowledge it as a being rather than an obstacle. The razor wing took one more step forward. Jake stood still, his heart pounding but his body calm. The creature was so close now that he could see his own reflection in its eyes. Then slowly, the great war beast lowered its head. The arena fell completely silent. For several seconds, nobody moved. The razor wing stood with its head lowered before Jake, and Jake stared at the creature in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. In all the footage he had watched, in all the stories he had heard, the razor wing had never bowed to anyone. Then the silence broke. Voices erupted from the observation deck, speaking in dozens of languages Jake's translator couldn't keep up with. Confusion, anger, disbelief. Something had gone wrong. The trial was broken. Commander Zekthar's voice cut through the noise. End the trial. Return the razor wing to its habitat. Cadet Morrison, exit the arena immediately. Jake looked at the razor wing one more time. The creature's eyes met his, and Jake saw something in them he couldn't name. Then handlers appeared from side gates, and the razor wing was led away. It went without resistance, but it kept looking back at Jake until it disappeared through the far gate. Jake walked out of the arena on legs that felt unsteady. His mind was spinning. What had just happened? Had he passed or failed? The razor wing had bowed, but nobody seemed to think that was a good thing. In the preparation area, the remaining cadets stared at him. Some looked confused. Others looked angry. Dex pushed through the crowd. What did you do? Dex asked. I don't know, Jake said honestly. The trial has been suspended, Commander Zekthar announced. All remaining cadets will be rescheduled. Cadet Morrison, come with me. Jake followed the commander through corridors he had never seen before. They walked in silence until they reached a conference room where other instructors were already gathering. They were all Kralix, all old warriors with scars and eyes that had seen combat. Sit, Zekthar said, pointing to a chair. Jake sat. The instructors formed a semicircle around him. One of them, a female with deep blue scales, spoke first. In 3,000 years of the trial of worth, the razor wing has never bowed, she said. Never. You must explain what you did. I didn't do anything, Jake said. I just stood there. You did not show warrior spirit, another instructor said. You did not challenge the beast. You showed weakness. No, Zekthar said quietly. He did not show weakness. I watched carefully. He showed something else. Then what? The blue-scaled instructor demanded. What could make the razor wing bow? Respect, Jake said. The word came out before he could think about it. All the instructors turned to stare at him. Explain, Zekthar said. Jake took a breath. On Earth, my people have lived with animals for thousands of years. Not just as food or tools, but as partners. We made wolves into dogs. We worked with horses. We learned to communicate with dolphins and elephants and dozens of other species. The strongest bonds came not from dominance, but from respect, from seeing those creatures as intelligent beings in their own right. The razor wing is a war beast, one instructor said. It is bred for combat, trained to evaluate warriors. But it's still a living thing, Jake said. When I looked at it, I didn't see a test. I saw a creature that's been forced to perform the same ritual over and over. I wondered when someone last looked at it as more than a tool, The blue-scaled instructor shook her head. This is emotional thinking weakness, is it? Kira's voice came from the doorway. She stood there with several other cadets who had already passed their trials. Commander, may I speak? Zekthar nodded. Kira walked into the room with her usual precise movements. I have been observing Cadet Morrison for 3 months. His approach is different, yes, but different is not the same as wrong. In strategy simulations, he finds solutions that other cadets miss because he thinks outside warrior culture. Perhaps he did the same with the trial. The trial is about courage, an instructor said. And he showed courage, Kira replied, standing before a creature that could kill him, doing something completely different from tradition, knowing he might fail. That requires courage. Dex appeared in the doorway next. May I also speak, Commander? This is irregular, the blue-scaled instructor said. Let him speak, Zekthar said. Dex entered the room. I passed my trial by doing what every Kralix is taught to do. Show aggression, show strength, prove I'm a warrior. But my father once told me something about the old days. He said razor wings weren't always just war beasts. They were partners. The greatest Kralix warriors didn't dominate their razor wings, they bonded with them. That was long ago, one instructor said. But it was real, Dex continued. Maybe the human found something we forgot. The room fell quiet. The instructors looked at each other, having conversations with their eyes that Jake couldn't follow. Finally, Zekthar spoke. I must consult the historical records. This council is dismissed for now. Cadet Morrison, you are confined to quarters until we reach a decision. Jake stood and left with Kira and Dex. They walked through the corridors without talking until they were outside. What's going to happen? Jake asked. Unknown, Kira said. There's no precedent for this situation. I might have ruined everything. Or you might have discovered something important, Dex said. Either way, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Jake returned to his quarters and waited. Hours passed. His roommate came and went without speaking. Through the window, he could see the academy continuing its routine. Training exercises, cadets running drills, life going on as if nothing had happened. Night fell. Jake tried to sleep but couldn't. He kept seeing the Razorwing's eyes, kept feeling that moment when the creature had lowered its head. What had it meant? What had he done? The next morning, a message appeared on his datapad. Commander Zekthar wanted to see him. Jake walked to the commander's office, his stomach tight with nerves. Whatever decision had been made, he was about to learn his fate. Zekthar's office was filled with artifacts from battles and campaigns. Weapons hung on the walls. Holographic displays showed star maps of conquered systems. The commander sat behind a desk made from the hull of an old warship. Sit, Zekthar said. Jake sat. I spent the night reviewing historical records, the commander began. Documents from before the Kralix Empire became focused on conquest and war. I found something interesting. Zekthar activated a hologram. It showed ancient Kralix warriors, but they looked different from modern ones. They stood beside Razorwings, but the posture was different. Not master and tool, but partners standing together. 3,000 years ago, when my people first trained with Razorwings, the bond was mutual, Zekthar said. Warriors earned partnership through respect, not dominance. But as our empire grew, as war became our culture, we forgot this. The Razorwings became weapons. The trial became about warrior spirit, about aggression. What does this mean for me? Jake asked. The council is divided. Some believe you failed because you did not show traditional warrior spirit. Others believe you succeeded because you connected with the Razorwing in a way we have forgotten how to do. And what do you believe, Commander? Zekthar was quiet for a long moment. I believe you showed me that my species has lost something important. But belief is not enough for a decision. So I propose a test. Another trial? In a way. The Razorwing's handlers report that it has been behaving strangely since yesterday. It will not eat. It paces in its habitat. It appears to be looking for something. Zekthar leaned forward. I want you to visit the Razorwing. We will observe. If it responds to you with aggression, you have failed the trial. If it responds with recognition, then perhaps you have shown us something worth learning. When? Jake asked. Now. They walked to a part of the academy Jake had never seen, where the war beasts were kept. The Razorwing's habitat was a large enclosure with artificial terrain that mimicked its homeworld. Through a viewing window, Jake could see the creature pacing back and forth. The door will open, Zekthar said. You will enter alone. We will be watching, but we will not intervene unless your life is in danger. Do you understand? Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. Then begin. The door slid open. Jake stepped through and it closed behind him. The razor wing stopped pacing the moment Jake entered. It turned and looked at him across the enclosure. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then the razor wing made that low, questioning sound Jake had heard in the arena. It took a step toward him. Then another. Jake stood still, his heart pounding. The creature approached slowly, as if it were being careful not to frighten him. When it was close enough, it lowered its head again. Jake reached out a shaking hand and placed it on the razor wing's armored head. The creature rumbled, a sound that was almost like purring. It pushed gently against Jake's hand. "Hello," Jake said softly. "I see you." In the observation room, Commander Zekthar watched in silence. Then he turned to the other instructors who had gathered. "The decision is made," he said. "Cadet Morrison passes the trial with distinction." The news spread through the academy faster than Jake expected. By the time he left the Razor Wing's habitat, cadets were already talking about the human who had passed the trial in a way no one ever had before. Some were curious. Others were skeptical. A few were hostile. Jake walked through the corridors with Commander Zekthar, still trying to process what had happened. "You will continue your regular training," the commander said, "but you will also spend time each day with the Razor Wing. We will see if this bond you have started can develop into something more." "What's the Razor Wing's name?" Jake asked. Zekthar stopped walking. "It does not have a name. Warbeasts are numbered, not named. Can I give it a name?" The commander looked at him with an expression Jake couldn't read. "That has not been done in living memory, but yes, you may name it. If you are to be partners, a name is appropriate." Jake thought about the creature, about its intelligence and the tiredness he had seen in its eyes. "Skyrend," he said, "because it looks like it could tear the sky itself." "Skyrend," Zekthar repeated. "It is fitting." Over the following weeks, Jake's routine changed. He still attended all his regular training, still struggled with physical exercises that other species found easy, still worked to prove he belonged at the academy, but now he also spent several hours each day with Skyrend. The first few sessions were awkward. Jake didn't know how to communicate with a creature so different from any Earth animal, but gradually they began to understand each other. Skyrend would tilt its head in certain ways when it wanted to show Jake something. Jake learned to read the creature's body language, to understand when it was curious or comfortable or alert. They started training together. Not the old way, where a warrior commanded and a beast obeyed, but as partners learning each other's capabilities. Skyrend was incredibly fast and strong, but Jake brought strategy and creative thinking. Together they developed combinations that surprised everyone who watched. Other cadets began to take notice. Dex was the first to approach Jake with questions. "How do you do it?" Dex asked one evening after training. "How do you communicate with Skyrend?" "I just pay attention," Jake said. "Watch how Skyrend moves, what catches its attention, how it responds to different situations. It's intelligent. More intelligent than anyone gives it credit for." "Could I learn this with another Razor Wing?" Jake looked at his friend. "I think so, but you'd have to stop thinking of them as tools and start thinking of them as partners." Word spread. More cadets started asking questions. Even some instructors began to show interest. Commander Zekthar watched all of this with quiet approval. One day, the commander called Jake to his office again. This time, Kira and Dex were also there. "I have a proposal," Zekthar said. "The three of you have formed an effective team. Your next training exercise will test this." He activated a hologram showing a barren moon with a small facility built into a crater. "This is a simulation of a hostile environment. Your mission is to infiltrate the facility, retrieve data from its core systems, and extract without being detected. You will face automated defenses and environmental hazards. And Jake, you will have Skyrend with you." "When do we start?" Kira asked. "Tomorrow at dawn." The next morning, Jake stood with Skyrend, Kira, and Dex on a transport pad. The simulation would take place in a sealed training environment that could recreate different planetary conditions. When they materialized, Jake felt the change immediately. The gravity was heavier than Terrace Prime's moon, closer to Earth normal. The air was thin and cold. Around them, rocky terrain stretched toward distant mountains. "The facility is 3 miles east," Kira said, checking her scanner. "Defenses include automated turrets, patrol drones, and pressure sensors." They moved out, with Skyrend scouting ahead. The Razor Wing's senses were far better than any of theirs, and it could detect threats before they appeared on scanners. Jake watched Skyren move through the terrain with natural grace. The creature paused at the top of a ridge and made a low sound. Jake raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. "Patrol drone ahead," he said quietly. He hadn't seen it yet, but he trusted Skyren's warning. They waited. 30 seconds later, a drone passed overhead, its scanner sweeping the area. It missed them completely because they had stopped before entering its detection range. "How did you know?" Dex whispered. "Skyren told me." They continued forward. When they reached the facility perimeter, they found it protected by a fence that would trigger alarms if touched. Kira studied it with her analytical mind. "There's a gap in the sensor coverage on the north side," she said, "but it's still protected by turrets. Skyren can move faster than the turrets can track," Jake said. "If we time it right, we can use that." They worked out a plan. Skyren would create a distraction on the south side, drawing the turrets' attention. While the defenses were focused there, the rest of them would slip through the north gap. It worked perfectly. The turrets tracked Skyren as the Razorwing moved at incredible speed along the southern fence. By the time the automated systems realized the real infiltration was happening elsewhere, the team was already inside. Inside the facility, they faced more challenges. Laser grids that required precise timing to pass through, locked doors that Kira had to hack, combat drones that Dex's strength and Jake's strategy helped them defeat. Through it all, Skyren moved with them like a natural part of the team. The Razorwing could sense threats through walls, could move silently despite its size, could communicate warnings that kept them safe. They retrieved the data from the core systems and made their extraction. When they returned to the transport point, Commander Zekthar was waiting for them. "Excellent work," he said. "Completion time was faster than any previous team. 0 alarms triggered. Perfect execution." As the semester continued, Jake's reputation changed. He was no longer just the human who couldn't match Kralick's strength or Velaran logic. He was the cadet who had bonded with a Razorwing in a way that hadn't been done in thousands of years. Other species started to see humans differently too, not as weak, but as bringing something unique to the galactic community. More cadets began asking about bonding with Razorwings. Commander Zekthar approved a new program, allowing interested cadets to learn the old ways. Dex was one of the first to volunteer, and he formed a bond with a younger Razorwing named Stormclaw. The academy started to change in other ways too. Instructors began questioning some of the old methods, looking for balance between warrior tradition and partnership. The combat training evolved to include more strategy and cooperation alongside strength and aggression. Months passed. Final examinations approached. Jake stood once again on the observation deck where he had stood his first night at the academy, looking out at the stars. Kira found him there. "You're thinking about graduation?" "Yes. Wondering what comes next." "You've changed this place, Jake. Made us all think differently about strength and partnership. I just did what felt right. That's why it worked." Kira looked out at the stars with him. "Our assignments came through today. We're being posted together. All 3 of us?" "Yes. Joint Task Force investigating unknown signals from the Outer Rim. They specifically requested a team with our skill combination, and they approved Skyren coming with us." Jake felt excitement rise in his chest. "When do we leave?" 2 weeks after graduation. The graduation ceremony was held in the main hall with representatives from dozens of worlds watching. Jake stood with his class wearing the uniform that marked him as a graduate of the Galactic Military Academy. Beside him stood Kira and Dex. Behind them, in a special enclosure, Skyren watched with those intelligent amber eyes. Commander Zekthar gave the final address. He spoke about duty, about courage, about serving the greater good. But he also spoke about something new. "This class has taught us that strength comes in many forms," the commander said. "That tradition must be balanced with innovation. That the greatest warriors are those who know when to fight and when to connect. We honor all of you who graduate today." Jake received his certification along with the others. As he walked across the stage, he heard applause from species he had never expected to appreciate him. The Kralick's veterans who had once looked at him with doubt now nodded with respect. After the ceremony, Jake's family appeared on a video screen from Earth. His mother cried, his father beamed with pride. His younger sister asked 100 questions about aliens and war beasts. "We're so proud of you," his mother said. "I'm proud of me too," Jake said. And he meant it. 2 weeks later, Jake stood at the docking port with Kira, Dex, and Skyrend. The ship that would take them to the outer rim waited, a sleek vessel designed for long-range exploration and potential combat. "Ready?" Kira asked. "Ready," Jake said. They boarded together, 4 beings from different worlds, brought together by training and formed into something more through mutual respect and partnership. As the ship left the academy behind and headed for the unknown signals at the galaxy's edge, Jake looked at his companions. Kira, with her logical mind and precise thinking. Dex questioning his empire's brutal traditions and finding a better way. Skyrend, the war beast who had been seen as a tool until someone looked at it with respect. And himself, Jake Morrison from Earth, who had shown the galaxy that humans brought something valuable to the stars. Not superior strength or advanced technology, but the understanding that connection could be as powerful as conquest. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, and the stars stretched into lines around them. Ahead lay mysteries and dangers. Behind them, the Galactic Military Academy had begun to change, rediscovering old ways of partnership that had been forgotten in centuries of war. Jake placed his hand on Skyrend's armored head, feeling the rumble of contentment from the great creature. Whatever they faced in the outer rim, they would face it together, not as master and tool, not as warrior and weapon, but as partners who had chosen each other. The galaxy was vast and full of species that had mastered strength, intelligence, and technology. But Earth had sent something different to the stars, something that looked at a snarling war beast and saw not a test to pass or an obstacle to overcome, but a living being worthy of respect. And that, Jake thought as he looked out at the endless stars ahead, might be humanity's greatest strength of all.